All right, let's talk about a fantasy series involving time travel. Well, hello, my name's Caleb. I'm a teacher, administrator, and I really love all things story related and nerdy. And today I want to talk about a progressive fantasy series. That just means somebody who gains and grows in power like most fantasy series do, but called Mother of Learning by Domagoj Krmaják. I'm probably mispronouncing that name. Just so you know, this will involve some slight spoilers, but nothing that you wouldn't get from reading the back of some of the books or any other kind of spoiler-free reviews that you would find along the way. Time travel is always a really interesting subject when it comes to movies and books. You have Groundhog's Day, which is just following a very sleepy town during kind of a celebratory time.
1,000 people freezing their butts off waiting to worship a rat.
And the chaos and mayhem and ultimately humanity that comes through it. And in Edge of Tomorrow, you have an alien invasion that comes, and you ultimately then see that kind of time travel loop that's going on.
How many times?
For me, it's been an eternity.
And see what has to be done to be able to perfect and solve what is going on to try to save humanity. And so time travel is something that comes into a lot of books and series, and this is one that really catches your imagination. So Mother of Learning follows one single primary character. Occasionally have a little side character come in, but you very much 99% of the time follow one main character named Zorian Kaczynski. He is a student who's going into, I believe it was his third year at a magic college. So he wakes up very abruptly. His sister jumps on top of him and wakes him up very rudely. And he goes about, and you learn very quickly about his relationship to his family and his relationship with people around him and the issues he has with social anxiety, and then ultimately looking at this world through his eyes as he eventually goes to the big city center that is built around a kind of a bore into reality that has a lot of mana and a lot of magic seeping through it. And so this college is situated right next to this spot of just magical well, so to speak. And you get into his life, seeing his life in the college and his relationship with his few friends and students, or lack of friends thereof. And ultimately you get to see his day, and then something happens that gets him into time travel, time loop, and he starts experiencing the same month over and over and over, and he has to figure out what is going on. There are some chaotic things that go on. I won't spoil it because the first time I read it, I thought it was great, and then all of a sudden it reset, and I was like, and it just kept getting better and better and better. What is really cool about learning about Zorian is that as you follow him through these time travels, you get to know his character, you get to know his foibles, and ultimately he starts to come to term with who he was, who he is, and who he hopes to become, all while trying to figure out what is going on and growing, because his magic doesn't reset, so to speak, every loop. His physical stature does, his health does, all of these things. Everyone else does, for the most part. And his magic, though, doesn't reset, and so he's able to grow in knowledge and ability because that's tied into his soul, and his soul is the thing that is continuing on, not his body. So if that makes sense. And so as he's going on, he's changing, and people start to recognize very quickly, like, as if they were just seeing him from one day to the next, like, what's different about you? And so other people start to experience what is going on. And he is a morally good character throughout this entire series of books. I read it on Royal Road, so I was able to read it in a little more unedited fashion, but I want to definitely get these books for my own personal collection at some point. And this Mother of Learning series, obviously Mother of Learning being a very famous quote, put up here as well. And what is fascinating about this character is that he has to do some pretty shady stuff as he's figuring out what's going on. And ultimately, if you think about it, somebody who's going through time travel and there's no consequences for their actions, they could do some horrible things and get away with it and just be like, oh, okay, whatever. But he never does that. You could look at maybe some of the things that he does in regards to he has some very specific magical abilities that you could call into question, but he's always hesitant to use those, and there's always a very distinct purpose for that, especially when finding out and combating more of the villains, the evil. And so as a morally good character, he doesn't take advantage of women, he doesn't go and do a bunch of crazy stuff just for no reason, committing mass atrocities. He's all about growing individually and committing to growing and becoming the best version of himself that he can, ultimately trying to stop what's going on and figure out what's going on and be able to reemerge into the real world, so to speak, the real timeline. But as he goes, he's arguably a very morally good person in a horrible situation. That's really something interesting to see as he grows. And this is true progression. You feel the time that this takes. He's not a Mary Sue where all of a sudden he goes through one thing and all of a sudden, boom. Phenomenal cosmic power. Anyways. Squirrel moment. So what is amazing though is you do sense this weight of time that comes on as he starts going through, I think in the end it's decades that he is growing through this time and becoming very powerful. Now, does he become too powerful? We'll talk about that in a bit. What's really cool is the support characters that come along. There are, as I kind of hinted, some other people that are involved with this that you get to know, but it's always through the eyes of Zorian. So you always have this question of who are these people? Are they ultimately good? What could go wrong with these relationships? And some of these side characters, even the ones that aren't involved in the loop that you just get to see reset each time, they're amazing characters. His advisor, I can never remember how to pronounce his name. Something. His advisor is probably my favorite side character that there is, and you'll figure that out very quickly when you do that. I think we've all had a teacher kind of like him, and it's just hilarious to read. There's some moments of amazing humor in this book, especially as Zorian goes through the same thing over and over. So he responds or learns how to respond and then forgets to respond. It just creates some hilarious dynamics in this city and in this world. What's really cool to see though is I mentioned that Zorian has these really challenging relationships with his family. Through this time travel loop, you start to see some things being mended, and his relationship with his sister is amazing to be able to see the progression, and you start to see him soften. And one of his brothers, who he's always being kind of having to not compare himself to, but being reminded of how great his brother is, you start seeing that change. And another brother that, you see these family dynamics and his parents, and nothing ever really becomes perfect. Like, most families don't get perfect, but it is really cool to see as he just develops as a character and as a person with these side characters around him, whether they're priests, whether they're mages, professors, friends, crazy insect creatures, anyways, all those types of things. When it comes to antagonists, very simple antagonists, because again, you have this situation going, you get to know more about these antagonists in the context of what is going on and what this main character is trying to stop. However, because it is reset, you get to know them, but then you kind of move on. So you get to know all these villains that are attached to the main plot that Zorian and company are trying to stop. And it's really intriguing as well how Zorian became a time traveler and then how others became and all that. So I digress. But there is one villain that you really like to know. There's one, we'll just say a lich. If you have read this book, you know what I mean, the series. And if not, there's no spoilers there. There's a lot of other characters, but just know the lich, he sticks around, and pretty cool character. Because come on, a good villain will drive your story. He's not a great villain, he's a good one. Now, in terms of world building, the world that the Mother of Learning takes place in is really fascinating. You have a society that was going to industrialization, and then crystallized mana is discovered. So trains and things like that are all run off of this crystallized mana. And the discoveries that are being made with science and technology and medicine during this time, all through magic, is really cool and fleshed out. You have all the traditional magic creatures with dragons and hydras, and then there's insect creatures, and then there's telepathic spiders, and then there's mind mice things and all that. And then there's also probably one of the coolest wild creatures you'll ever hear about, which is the Grey Hunter. We'll just call that. Which is ultimately probably in my mind, one of the scariest things that you could actually hunt in a magical world, and just read it and hear about that. And it comes back in some surprising ways, which is really cool. And again, this is a progression fantasy. And so a character starts off weak and gradually becomes stronger, whether through merit or through trial and error. And Zorian, that happens especially with the Grey Hunter. I'll just say that. Again, he's not a Mary Sue. He just grows through experience and practice and having some great opportunities along the way. This is a world where there was previous wars, and so this big kingdom that Zorian is in is just one of several, and it's at a peak of power. But only a few decades before, there was what was called the Weeping. It was a big, almost think like the Black Plague swept through the world.
Bring out your dead!
But it's a society that is trying to recover from that. And then this is also a society where the gods have become absent, and the angels are the ones that actually go and interact with people and have powers and try to oppose evil in a primordial sense, primordials. And so what's cool though is that these aren't your typical stereotypical angels that you see that are often portrayed in movies and in fantasy, but you have more almost biblical type description of angels that come about in this. But that's all I'll say. But it's really interesting to see as they go along. When it comes to plot, it is so straightforward. You have wake up, grow, fight, repeat, all that way. There's occasional moments of levity and stuff, but it is this repetition trying to figure out what is going on and why and how do we stop what is going on. I won't go into what is going on, but read it and you'll find out very quickly what's going on. It's a very easy book to get into and to follow along with, and it is a book that has some lulls here and there, but what series doesn't? What's really cool is if you dig into the themes of this, it's easy to just look at a book or a series at face value, but if you truly look at themes and what drives these characters and these plots, Mother of Learning has some really interesting themes when you look at what does perseverance really look like, especially in almost inevitable loss or inevitable chance of failure, but how do you keep trying and growing in the meantime? The value of relationships is explored and the importance of having relationships, especially meaningful relationships moving forward, and how you can take opportunities to grow and to heal wounds of relationships that you maybe have squandered, we'll just say, and things like that. And one of the other main characters that comes along, you see a lack of relationships and how important relationship then becomes and trust through those relationships. Ultimately, the responsibility and the pursuit of knowledge, Mother of Learning knowledge, that comes to be able to try to stave off disaster and the opportunities that come from that creates these characters who have to struggle and fight and persevere in a very fascinating world with a really unique situation. Now, Domagoj Krmiak, his dialogue that he writes is actually really good. Some of the books that are on Royal Road and that are then edited, they can be good but clunky, and I think the Mother of Learning has some really solid dialogue through it. Each character has a distinct voice, and it's something that you really come to like, and there's certain interactions that you just really like to see and to listen to and hear about as you read through it. There's great action throughout this book that comes up, especially when there's repetition of events, but targeted in a different way. And so that action is really cool. The main character, he does have a very OP power, I will just say, but that's something that he develops very quickly and well, because you could look at it as a Mary Sue, but you also look at, okay, this is a guy who every month repeats and he gets access to basically unlimited money through that process, so he can afford to have the training that nobody ever on this world will ever be able to get. So he's able to have this experiences, and he has friends along the way. You have Morlocks, and you have different people that are kind of references to other things in sci-fi and fantasy that come alongside to be able to help him grow, and he's able to just keep going at a breakneck speed because of the opportunities in this time travel, time loop story. So ultimately, is the main character overpowered? Probably not, given the circumstances. Occasionally it feels like it, but when you look at it in the context, it doesn't feel like it's too much. Now, when you think about the story, it does have some lulls. That's the weakness. Sometimes there are lulls where it just goes into too much explanation and too much development. What are we trying to do? And just gets into that. But the strength comes when, in the beginning, you're able to experience the world, you see the world, the college, the academic life. I wish there had actually been a little more about that. I think if the college had been bigger, it's described as this big college just being reset for this annual festival. And then all of a sudden you find out, oh, his class only has like 12 students. So I think if they had increased the size of the student body, it would have been really cool to see the number of students increase and the experiences with that. But anytime there is a lull, if you go to a new setting,
I'm going on an adventure!
Changes when Zorian goes and travels his country, goes to other countries and be able to experience different quests, so to speak, to be able to track down different keys that he needs to be able to solve this mystery of why he's in this time loop. That is when this story really, really shines. So it's really impressive. Is on Goodreads and on Amazon. Each one of the books gets better, which is really cool. You usually see maybe a dip, but each one gets rated even higher than the previous one. Now, I would say at its best, this book is a solid A. It's great. At its challenging parts, it dips down into like a B-, something like that. So overall, I would give this series a very solid B+. I would just say across the board B+. There are moments that make it dip down for me, but reading it was so enjoyable, and I want to probably go back and reread portions of it again, and I don't reread books that I don't like, and so I'm going to give that a B+ rating. Highly recommend you go and check out Mother of Learning. If you don't like it, check it out, put it down, go to something else. There's more books out there, trust me. You can put down a book. That's okay. But if you like this type of academic, time loop, growth, progression, fantastical world, then Mother of Learning might be right up your alley. Well, thanks for sticking around here. If you've read Mother of Learning, I would love to know your thoughts on the book, some of your favorite moments or things. Or if you have not read Mother of Learning, but you've read other progression fantasy, He Who Fights with Monsters, things like that. I have some other videos that I'll link here at the end for other lit RPG books that I've reviewed in series. But anyways, hope you have an amazing day. God bless. Go read some amazing stories. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.